So today, again, we're going to be finishing up our talk on negative externalities and be looking at a few ways at which, one, we can actually regulate and use regulation to help get these tools closer together or to get our quantities closer together. Then we'll move into some difficulties that come up with our regulations and then talk a little bit about international um, and we'll see where we go. So we're going to start out with looking at we're looking at three types of regulation we're going to see. The first one we call the command and control regulation. And really what we'll be doing is just introducing all three and then coming back through and showing what they all look like. So the first one, again, command and control regulation. So basically what we do here is we say that a firm has to cut so much pollution, and we may also, as the state, decide what technology they have to use to make this work, and so on. So again, they're going to specify those allowable quantities of pollution, and again, just figure out what can we make work, how much pollution we're going to allow, and how are we going to make you clean it up. So what this is going to do is this is going to make firms install this anti-pollution equipment, which then leads to increased costs. And then since they have to clean up their pollution, this does require them to account for their cost of production, because the more they produce, the more they have to do to keep their pollution in check or to keep it under our acceptable level, or however we want to phrase that. So again, the idea of this is just that. And to do this, a couple examples we'll see. The big example that I can normally think of is we have fuel efficiency standards. So basically, what the EPA says is that car manufacturers, so a car manufacturer has to have a certain gas mileage or certain miles per gallon across their fleet of cars. Right. So, and that's a car manufacturer, short for manufacturer. So basically, what they say is, so by 2020, maybe you have to have 30 across your entire fleet of cars. Maybe you have to have 30 miles a gallon. Maybe by 2025, they say 35 or whatever the case may be. So in this case, what the EPA does, they say you have to meet this standard by this year. So it's an example of a command and control regulation. In this case, they give the manufacturers a choice on how to make that happen. So they're not going to tell Ford, oh, well, you have to get up to 35 miles per gallon. You're going to do it by building your car out of a lighter material, right? Instead, they just say, this is what you have to be here by X date, and the car manufacturers need to figure out how to get there. And within the certain example, this, when we referring to car manufacturer, referring to their cars, and it's very specifically their cars. So if we think about something like Peterbilt and their trucks, not really going to count towards this because you can't really expect a truck to have the same efficiency as a compact sized car, meaning a semi to have the same as a car. And even like Ford and GM, their trucks, I don't even think count towards this fuel efficiency standard, especially their larger trucks like F-350 or something like that that's more commercial use, won't really apply to this as much. So again, the practice here, we're saying that you have to reach a standard, or you have to be at a certain level by a certain date, and maybe we tell you how to do it. This comes with some difficulties, though, and a few difficulties or shortfalls of our command and control regulation. The first thing we're going to see is that if we just say you have to be at a standard, there's really no incentive to go beyond the standard set. That is, there is no reason to do better. And an example of this that we may see, and again, it's not really directly pollution. I mean, it's not pollution, but if you think about school, right? Suppose you have the last semester of high school, the last semester of whatever it is you have going on. Oftentimes, if you're in your last semester of high school or last semester of whatever, and you have your job or you have whatever it is you have going on lined up, ready to go, there's a decent chance you're going to come out and say, you know what? I just need, as long as I get a C in the case of schooling, as long as I get a C, I'm good to go. So I'm not going to sit and, spend these hours and hours and hours trying to get an A when a C will get me the exact same thing, right? So there's no incentive to go above and beyond what's absolutely necessary. That's one of the difficulties that will come up with this command and control regulation. The second one is inflexible. That is, everybody or all polluters are held to the same standard. And in some instances, this may be very difficult. And if we think about like two different energy sources, if you think about something like natural gas versus coal, and as I say this, I'm not knocking the coal industry, it's a dirtier fuel. But if we compare something like natural gas to coal, natural gas is going to produce a cleaner, it's going to pollute less than a coal mine. Same thing if we look at a heavy manufacturing company, something like cars or electricity, and compare that to a Q-tip factory or a computer factory. Odds are the larger the car manufacturer, the energy plant is going to have to produce more pollution because they just are producing different goods. So if we have the same the same standard may not work well for everybody, as well as the same technology may also not work for everybody. That is, again, a car plant and a Q-tip plant have kind of two different things going on, and they could have a lot of differences in their process and so on. And the second and the third kind of thing that could come up in difficulty that we may see is they have a phrase as compromise in the political process, or there's potential for corruption. That is, we have fine print loopholes and exceptions in the law. So what we might do is we might say, well, all factories have to adhere to this standard except for XYZ, and XYZ applies to only one person or one factory. So in this case, we have those exceptions, loopholes, fine print, etc. So again, we have those compromises that kind of don't make this system ideal. And if we could fill in those loopholes, it'd be great. But we do want to be aware that there is room in the whole process for stuff like that to come up. We're all human, and you don't want to suggest that, oh well, our system is uncompromisable, because as soon as you think that, you're going to find that someone's going to be right there to compromise it for you. So we have those difficulties. The next couple tools we have take a more market-oriented approach. So whereas with the command and control, we said that you have to do something, right? You have to cut your pollution. You have to do what we tell you to do. With these market-oriented tools, you're not necessarily going to be told you have to do something, but there's going to be incentive for you to do it. So again, if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to clean up, you don't have to. No one's going to make you, but you may have to pay an extra tax, or you may have to do something to make it where you don't actually clean up. So the first kind of thing we're going to see is called a pollution charge. Okay. And the pollution charge is going to be this tax, and a part of this tax, we're going to say, all right, if you produce pollution, we're going to tax you on it. The idea of this being, again, that there's going to be, the idea being that the tax will be more expensive than cleaning up some of the pollution. So we'll kind of see how this works out. So what this pollution charge is going to do is, instead of us saying, well, I have to clean up 2 units to 2 tons of pollution, or I have to clean up this fixed amount that the government just arbitrarily picked for me. Instead, what I'm going to be looking at, instead of that kind of arbitrary thing going on, I'm going to have this profit max. I'm going to have a profit maximizing approach to it. That is two things. One, I'm going to cut some pollution, maybe not all, but I'm going to cut what's good for me to cut. But also with this, I'm going to have flexibility to take the least expensive technology to actually reduce that. So with the pollution charge, what we can expect to see is that uh, our costs will be lower, and uh, we as the firm get to decide how much we want to cut back. Um, so again, and what we'll see happen with this is those firms that can reduce pollution cheaply will do so, and they will do so as much as they can to minimize taxes. Firms that can do so, firms that are more expensive to reduce pollution, may say, "Well, we just need to hold off and make things work." So when we think of our pollution charge, one of the things we may see come up with this is something like this. And I'm going to stick with theirs because why not? So in this case, on what we're looking at is the quantity of pollution. And up here we have dollars. So on these two graphs, or these two curves, what we're seeing first is this pollution charge. This is the tax that you pay for your pollution. And up here we have the marginal cost of cleaning. And the reason this marginal cost curve is going to take the shape it does, so if I'm thinking about right now, how can I make my own life more efficient, or how can I, if you think about anything, how can I watch my spending? How can I, drive more efficiently, or so on? The first bit that we clean up is going to be fairly easy to do, right? So if I'm thinking about my home, maybe I double check, make sure I turn the lights off when I leave. If you're thinking about making your budget more efficient, maybe you say, well, I'm gonna eat out. Uh, I'm gonna eat out less, or I'm going to do something to save money, or I'm gonna sit at home and uh, be socially isolated, or be socially distanced is the phrase that we're supposed to be using. So right, so something like that. But in the case of our factories, or in the case of our polluters, maybe it's something where we say, well, uh, maybe the first step is to put like some kind of filter in your chimney, or some kind of filter in your exhaust system, right? And that can be a very easy process to do, very cheap, very easy. So the first little bit of reducing pollution is going to come at a low cost. But then as we get more and more and more into it, we really have to start making more drastic changes. So if you think about your budget again, right? So first thing we do is we cut out, and not necessarily saying, oh, we just live in and eat in every night, but maybe we say at first we cut out going out to eat a couple times a week, or maybe we say instead of going to Starbucks every day or going to Scooters, I make my own coffee, right? Whatever the case may be, maybe we take that first step. But then the next step, maybe this next step is me saying, well, now I'm going to change what groceries I buy, right? So I'm going to go through, figure out, now I have to be a little more in depth, figure out, well, maybe instead of getting a brand name, I can get a generic, or something like that. So, and then as we get more and more into it, we really start to get more, it becomes a lot more work to reduce, in this case, our spending. And same thing with pollution. The first little bit, it's easy to fix. We can throw in some sweeps. Maybe we can analyze our system and see if anybody is, being a little exorbitant with their, not being resourceful with their resources, or not being resourceful. So the first little bit's easy to do, but then as we get more and more and more clean, we're going to see it's become more and more expensive. So there's going to be some point where maybe once we get up to this point, maybe now to get more efficient, I have to actually like build a brand new factory, right? So we have those kind of things going on where again, it becomes more and more expensive to clean up as we get cleaner. Uh, and what we'll see we'll do as firms, if we're faced with this pollution charge or this tax, we're going to see that for any instance, we're going to use marginal analysis. So we're going to note our marginal benefit and marginal cost, right? And with this, our marginal cost is, so if we clean, the marginal benefit is not paying a tax, but the marginal cost is the cost to clean. So as we go through each point, so if we start out looking at 10, or reducing 10 pounds of pollution, this first bit, our marginal benefit is up here at $1,000, but our marginal cost is only $300. So I spend $300 so I don't have to pay $1,000 in a tax. In which case, I'd rather spend $300 than $1,000. So I would go ahead and clean up these first 10 units. The second bit, again, I have a choice of spending $500 to clean up, or I can spend $1,000 and pay the tax. Again, I have my marginal benefit and my marginal cost. So I will go ahead and clean up these second set of units. And same thing with the third one. We'll see that my marginal benefit will again exceed my marginal cost. In which case, again, I will keep cleaning up some more. But then to go to the next step, right, we see that our marginal cost is up here at about 1,500. But our marginal benefit now is down here still at $1,000. So to clean up anything more than 30 pounds of pollution, I have to give up $1,500 in order to save $1,000, which is not going to be an ideal situation for me. So not really where I want to be. So we're going to see in this case, oops, we will end up cleaning up 30 tons of pollution. Pollution. Or 30 pounds, 30 tons, whatever our favorite unit is. And that's really what and the difference between this and the command, again, one with the command, we could be in a situation where where the government says, well, you have to clean up, government could have said you have to clean up 20 tons of pollution, 20 pounds of pollution, in which case, right, I'd be here. But if we use the pollution charge, I ended up cleaning up more pollution. So I'd be there at that 20. And same thing if we had 40, you'd see that I'd be cleaning up more than is necessarily socially desirable. Whereas again, once we get to this 30, it's kind of a sweet spot where, we kind of, in this instance, it's a sweet spot where we say, hey, we found a nice balance between the tax and the cost, and the firm has found a nice balance between being polluting and, being efficient with their spending. Or being efficient, they found a nice balance between their pollution and their economic output. And that's what this little bit here says. Again, as long as that marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost, we'll keep producing more. But our golden spot, as was for the last few weeks, marginal benefit equal to marginal cost is that golden spot. Or in this case, as close as we can get them together. So in this case, we're jumping in increments of 10. We have that. If we're in a spot where we can pick a very specific spot, great. If we have to work in terms of something like this, again, just as close as we can get is going to be our ideal spot. So that's the pollution charge. Then the last kind of thing that we have, and this one's a little more interesting, gets a little more fun, but we have what's called our marketable permits. And with these, what we're going to do is, at first, it's going to seem like a command, but as we get more into it, we're going to see it really is a market program. Excuse me. And these are going to be permits where we have a permit and it allows the firm to emit some amount of pollution. So we're going to come through, we're going to give every firm's going to get to emit so many tons of pollution, and that's what they get to do. However, with these permits, what firms can do is firms, if they have more permits than pollution, can actually sell off what's remaining to the other firms. And similarly, if a firm has more pollution they do permits, they can go out and buy permits from these firms that are cleaner. So what this will look like, and what I'm going to do is just really quick, kind of compare each of the things. So suppose we have two firms, right? We're going to have U.S. Steel and Tesla. So we have two firms, and with these two firms, they have a cost to clean, and we're going to say the marginal cost to clean up so many tons of pollution. So in this case, we have 10, 20, and 30 tons of pollution. We can do 1, 2, 3, whatever works. But we have these. So if we think about U.S. Steel, kind of an older company. Maybe they have a lot of older technology, and they can fairly easily clean up and become more efficient. However, Tesla is a relatively newer company, so maybe Tesla already has those. Maybe Tesla already has all the newest technology, and for them to really clean up any pollution would be, they're already at minimal for pollution. So for them to clean up any pollution would be relatively hard. So in this case, we're going to suppose that we kind of have three things going on. So we're looking at these first three cases of marginal cost to clean up. Excuse me. We're going to suppose that our goal is to clean 4 units of pollution, or 40 tons of pollution. Right. So in essence, we want any 2 points. So we want to either be at 10 and 30, 20 and 20, or 30 and 10, right? Because we want to clean up 40 tons of pollution. We want to figure out how can we clean this up and how can we make it the most efficient. So in this case, we'll see that maybe U.S. Steel, their cost to clean is 200, 500, and 1,000. While Tesla's cost to clean up is, say, 1,200, 1,600, and 2,200. Okay. So Tesla costs more, again, because they're already an efficient company. It's easy for them to clean. So we have 3 types of policies. And the first one we'll look at is our command and control. And from this policy, we're going to say, well, it's fair. It's going to be fair if we make each firm clean up to 20 tons of pollution. So we'll say that each firm cleans 20 tons. So with our command and control, we'll see that we'll be in this point right here, where they both clean up 20 tons. So we'll look at the cost to U.S. Steel, the cost of Tesla, and the total. So the cost to U.S. Steel, let's do it this way. The cost to first U.S. Steel will be the cost to clean up 10 plus the cost to clean up 20. So cost for 10 plus the cost for 20. which to them is 500 and 200. So this comes out to, it costs them 200 for the first 10, then 500 for the second 10, which gives them a total cost of $700. Then for Tesla, again, they're going to clean up the first two. So cost for 10 plus cost for 20. And this is the marginal cost for each of those. So they have 1,200 plus 1,600, or 1,500, 1,600. Okay. So this comes out to a $2,800 bill. So our societal cost to clean up will be our 700 plus 2,800, which comes out to $3,500. And again, this is with the command and control. So the second one, suppose we have a pollution charge. And we'll set this equal to, say, let's set it equal to $1,300. Because that's a way we can charge and get that efficient amount. So if we have a pollution charge at 1,300, we're going to see that U.S. Steel is going to cut 30 tons of pollution, because if not, they have to pay the charge. But Tesla is only going to cut 1, and then they'll pay the charge for the other 2. So if we think about the cost to, so again, we'll get into our different costs. So the cost to, again, U.S. Steel will be the cost to clean all, or to clean 10 plus 20 plus 30. That is, they're going to go through, they're going to do the ultimate cleanup, which in this case will give us 2, 5, and 1,000. So 200 plus 500 plus 1,000, which would give us 5 and 2 is 7 plus 1 is 2,700. Then for Tesla, they'll have the cost to clean their 10 plus 2 units of tax. So Tesla, the cost to clean 10 in this case would be just $1,200. But now they're going to pay 2 units of this, wait, yeah, 1,200. But they're now going to pay, instead of cleaning up the other 2, they're going to pay 2 units of a $1,300 tax. So for them, this will come out to 1,200 plus 2,600, which ends up with a total of $3,800. And if we think about our societal costs, this will just be the total cost to clean up. The idea of this being to our society is this tax revenue will be collected and used somewhere else. So in this case, we have our 2,700 from U.S. Steel plus just the 1,200 from Tesla. So in this case, we bump down to 3,900. Interesting. Hey, give me just a second. Sorry. Where did I mess up? They cleaned up 27. They cleaned up 1,200. They replaced that 1,600 with here. This should, so what did we actually clean up? Let's just take this total. Sorry about that. So in total, we took 200 plus our 500 plus 1,000 plus 1,200. So in this case, this gives us 700 plus 2,200, which gives us a total of $2,900. So where was I getting? Oh, this is $1,700 to U.S. Steel. My bad. There we go. That's better. Cool. So our societal cost in this case is $2,900, and again, that's because tax revenue will go somewhere elsewhere. So we can say, right, this is great, but because right, we're spending less. But one of the things that came up is U.S. Steel in this case had to spend more money to clean up than they did under the command. Tesla also had to spend a little bit more, but society became off a little bit better off. So maybe this is ideal, maybe not. But again, if we're looking at it from a societal perspective, we're now better off. Then the third case that we'll see is going to be the pollution permits. And with these, what we'll do is we'll suppose that each firm starts with 2 permits. Or each firm has enough permits where they each have to clean up 2 tons, where they each clean up 20 tons of pollution. That is, we're starting in that middle spot with the 2 things. So with the pollution permits, we're starting right here. And we're going to value these permits at $1,100. And we'll say that the market price came out to $1,100. This market price was not established by the government. In this case, it was just set by the market. That is, that's what, after we do trade, that's what we're going to figure out this is going to work out. So if I scroll up, if we're starting here in this gold box, oops. If we're starting here in this gold box, and the cost of a permit is $1,000, we'll see that U.S. Steel will probably be willing to sell a permit because they can bring in $1,100 and sell their permit for $1,000. But Tesla will also buy this permit. So U.S. Steel will sell a permit because 1,000 is less than 1,100. That is, the revenue is greater than the cost to clean. But on the other side, Tesla will do the same. They'll be willing to buy that permit because if they buy the permit, now they only have to clean up 1 ton of pollution. So they don't have to spend the $1,600. Again, because 1,100 is less than 1,600. So this 1,100 is what they have to spend on the permit that was sold by U.S. Steel, but their $1,600 is what they're going to save by not having to clean. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll end up, and I'll do this in red because why not? We'll end up here at 30 and here at 10. Then a permit gets traded in the middle of it all. So when we think about our cost to each firm, in this case, we first have U.S. Steel. And this will come out to be, their cost to be the cost to clean. But then we'll subtract away the revenue from their extra permit. And again, this will be the cost to each firm. So the cost for them to clean up, we found up here to be $1,700. But then the revenue from our permit is going to be this $1,100. Right. So in this case, the cost for US Steel to clean up comes out to only $600, which is nice for them. But now for Tesla, right? They have again their cost to clean. In this case, they're only going to clean 1 unit of pollution, but they are going to have to pay. So the cost to purchase this permit, so they have to pay for that permit that they purchased from US Steel. And in this case, the cost to clean for them will be $1,200. But the cost to purchase this permit will come in and be, what is it, $1,100. So for Tesla, the total cost to clean up would be $2,300. And if we look at our total cost or our societal cost, we can just add these together, and we get this is 600 plus 2,300, which brings us to 2,900. So it worked out in this case for the tax and the pollution permits to have the same societal cost. But if we compare them to the command and control, we said this came out to be more efficient than command and control. And as you go through, depending on what your goals are, could potentially impact which one we prefer. But if we're looking at society's cost, and if we compare this to command and control, specifically command and control, if we compare it to, US Steel went from spending $700 to now only spending $600. And Tesla went from spending $2,800 now to only $2,300. So they both become better off, and we still clean up the same amount of pollution, which is kind of a win for both the firms and is a win for society. So we have that as our different types of permits, how they all can work out, and so on. So the last kind of tool we have one more tool to help deal with pollution and help keep everything in line in terms of oftentimes in terms of our endangered species or in terms of managing our resources. And to do this, what we have is this thing called property rights. That is, we allow ownership of others to have control of land or control whatever it is they control, and others are not allowed to infringe upon this ownership without paying compensation. So if you think about like a private park, right? To go to a private park, you have to pay the owners of the park. If you're going to go fishing in a private pond, you have to pay for. You maybe have to pay to go fishing there. Maybe you have to pay for the fish that you take. Whatever it is, you have to compensate the people who own the property that they have. So when you think about our property rights, the thing that I'm going to think about is foresting. And suppose that we have a forest. Right? And I'm going to, for the sake of now, break this up into plots in the forest. Right? And each forest has trees, right? They all have trees, and because it's a forest, right? So here are my trees, and so on. Now, if we just had, and we said, all right, it's a forest, everybody have fun with it, odds are everybody's going to go out, gather all the wood they can, and work as quick as they can to have basically control of the forest. However, if we establish property rights, so we allow somebody to own this forest, and however we get there, but somebody is allowed to own this forest when we establish property rights. If somebody comes in to steal a tree from the property owner, then they have to, then they have to pay the property owner, or there's a legal course for that. So if we think about something that's not, I don't own, Or if I don't own a certain thing, I might be a little more reckless. I might not really care if it lasts for 30, 40 years. Instead, I just want to get what I can get and run away. But if we actually own the property, so if I'm the owner of this forest, I want it to last me for, a while, right? I want it to be able to take care of me. So I want it to not only take care of me this year, but also next year, the year after that, the year after that, and so on. So if I own this whole plot of land, instead of coming through and taking out all the trees at one time, what I might do is in year one, just take out the first plot. Then in year two, what I'll do is I'll plant new trees in last year's plot and then cut down this plot. Then in year three, these trees will go a little bit. I'll plot in year two, and then I cut down this plot. And this process will continue uh, over and over and over again. Right, you can probably see what we're doing. Right, we're just making these trees grow a little bit, then we cut down, grow new. And we keep doing that over and over and over again until we get to this last year. Right. Now, when we get to this last year, hang on, I don't want those back yet. When I get to this last year, hopefully by the time I'm here, down here, these trees in my first plot are fairly well regrown. And same thing, the second is getting back to being pretty well regrown, so on, right? And hopefully they're all growing back, and that way, at the end of the 15th year in this case, I can come back to my first plot, and then this forest can continue taking care of, or the revenue I generate from this forest or from the lumber can continue taking care of myself and my family for another 15 years. Right? So we have these property rights. And again, with property rights, I have an incentive to manage this property and manage it in a sustainable way that kind of works for, that keeps myself taken care of. But as I'm taking care of myself, um, one of the things that can come up if we're trying to, if we're trying to do stuff in the everybody free for all, another thing that comes up, and the nice thing about trees, they create oxygen. So by using this sustainable practice, it one makes it where I don't have to, where it's taking care of me for the rest of my life, where this, meaning this land is taking care of me, but also I don't, since I'm properly managing this plot of land, I don't have to go out and uh, I don't have to go out and find a new forest to cut down because because my own is taking care of me. Uh, but I also don't, so I don't have to go out and take out new forests, and I don't have to, excuse me, and I don't have to, excuse me, sorry, backtrack one more time. I don't have to take out new forests, but also, if we think about like the nice thing about trees is not only do they create wood, but they also create oxygen. I don't have to worry about my oxygen being depleted or anything like that. So we have our forest, right? We kind of see how this helps us out and keeps things managed and so on. So when we think about environmental laws, we are going to see advantages and disadvantages of them. That is, there are going to be benefits of having a cleaner environment, but this benefit is going to come at a cost. So as we've seen throughout a lot of economics, it's a fairly common practice where things work out that way. When you think about having a cleaner environment in general, people really aren't going to complain about having clean air. So if we think about the benefits of environmental protection, first thing we'll see is that people they'll be healthier, and they tend to live longer, which healthy is good for productivity and longevity. It's, generally we like when people live long and healthy lives. So we see that people will live healthier and longer. Um, But in addition to that, if we think even from an economic standpoint, having a cleaner environment can help certain industries. So some industries are going to rely on air and water being, clean. So we think about farming, fishing, tourism. Um, in general, if you think about farming, you probably want your cows or your livestock to be consuming, good, healthy food. And you probably would appreciate your livestock having had, healthy food while they were growing up and all that good stuff. So on the farming side, we have that. Same thing with fishing. Uh, Odds are, if you're catching a fish, you want your fish to come from a clean source of water rather than a dirty source. And if I'm on vacation, I like it when I'm on vacation to be able to breathe outside and not have to smell uh, not have to smell factory or anything like that. So these three industries, something that can benefit from a clean environment. This third thing, property values can be higher. So we kind of talked about this a little bit with, I mentioned property values before in the early part of this chapter and on Monday. But when we think about these property values, like one of the things we'll see with this is people can, if I have two of the same house, one of them is surrounded by dirty air, dirty water, the other is a good water source, it's by clean air, and they're the exact same price, same distance from work, and all that good stuff, then I'm probably going to come in and say, well, I'd rather have the cleaner air or the cleaner water than the dirty water. So when we're saying our property values are higher, that's what we're looking at. Then the fourth one, there may be some instances where the market isn't necessarily going to pick up that we enjoy, clean air, clean water, right? It's not everything relates back to the market, and in some way, just me being able to go out and breathe clean air, it's good for me and good for everything. However, on the other side of this, we do have costs to reducing pollution. The first thing we'll note is that um, reducing pollution can be expensive, and in order to actually reduce pollution, we're going to see that we have to actually sacrifice resources. So we think about the filters, right? The filters that we talked about for the factories, which we'll say they're a paper based or charcoal based or whatever kind of filter they are. We'll say they're paper filters. The paper that we're using for those filters comes from trees, and those trees, instead of being turned into paper filters, could have been used to make wood, to make paper for writing, or whatever the case is. So we're sacrificing resources to combat pollution. And what we'll see with this as we go through is the marginal cost is generally increasing. That is, if I need to clean up just a little bit, I can probably quickly do it. But in order to get in order to make as I get more and more and more clean, it's going to become more expensive to have the same amount of cleaning. And again, if you think about your budget or you think about cleaning up your house, right? If the house is a little bit of a mess, you can go through, pick up all the big stuff, and get garbage picked up fairly quickly. But to get everything fully sorted, it might take some time to actually do. So as we strive for that higher level of cleanliness, it becomes more and more expensive, more time intensive to make that happen. However, the other side of this is, while our marginal costs increase, the marginal benefits of reducing pollution tends to fall. That is, everything's a poison, right? If I have too much water, it's poisonous. And to the same degree, if you think about something like water, if I were to somehow drink too much water, there is such a thing as water poisoning. However, on the other side, if I have, say we think about chlorine in pools. Right? If you go swimming and you don't have any allergies or anything like that, but if you go swimming with no allergies in a pool that has chlorine, for the most part, you're not going to see any problems, right? You're going to go in, you'll swim, and you won't really have any problems. However, if you were to ingest just straight up chlorine, then you're probably going to die, because in a large quantity, that chlorine is a poison. Whereas in a small quantity, it kills bacteria, but it's not concentrated enough to do any damage to us as people. So, same thing with your regular pollutants. If you have a small amount of pollutants in the air, it's not really going to make a difference between having a small amount and no amount, and a small amount and zero emissions. But if you have, but there is a fairly large difference between having your air being, between having a lot and a little. Um, that is again the benefit of, as we get less and less and less and less, I get less and less health benefits and so on from having it cleaner. So our benefits go down, costs go up as we go through. So that's the challenges that we have. The last little bit looks at international environmental issues. And for that, one of the things we'll note is that it's internationally, it can be very complex to try and make environmental policy work. On one note, the countries are sovereign, so if I want to put up a factory right on the Canadian border, there's nothing Canada can really do about it unless they want to go to war. But the other part is, if you do manage to make a deal, quote unquote, it's very easy for somebody to potentially back out of it, or for somebody to go do something else. So again, and if I, as a sovereign country, do decide to back out of a deal, what are you going to do about it? And that works both ways. And the other part of these deals is, yes, you can back out, but also it can be hard to verify who is participating and who is not participating in our climate deal, or whatever we want to call it. That is, sometimes we'll have it come up where we say, oh yeah, well, we cleaned up our environment, but what about these people, or what about this country or this country, or so on, right? So we start pointing fingers at everybody, and then we kind of see how that works. So trying to set up this international environmental system can be complex, um, and oftentimes the market approach that we talked about, whether it be the taxes or the permits, can be one of the easier ways to address these issues that face us as far as climate goes. Then this last little bit, trade-off between economic output and environmental protection. We kind of saw that, right? In order to have a clean environment, we have to sacrifice resources, or we potentially have to. So if we want to get to the extreme end, zero emissions, we'd be doing a lot of sacrificing of resources, and it'd be very costly, but we're not going to see much of a difference to ourselves between zero emission and um, a very small amount of emissions. So that's just a little bit that we see, and that is what we have for, or at least that's what I have for our negative externalities.